Hello and welcome. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create a sports fixture application. I'm going to write this application in Excel VBA and I'm going to show you how to write professional quality code while doing so. Now, if you want to get the source code for this video, you can get it from the link in the description below the video. In this video, I'm going to focus specifically on how to generate the fixtures, and if you want to see how the rest of the code works, you can check it out from the download. If you enjoyed the video, then please click on the like button, and if you'd like to get notified of my upcoming videos, then click on the subscribe button and the bell icon beside it. So let's go ahead and have a look at exactly what the application does. Now we're going to look at how the application works, and then we're going to start writing the code. So you can see a list of teams in the yellow box. And when we click on Create Fixtures, what that will do is generate an entire league of fixtures based on these teams. Now we can do this for any number of teams. So for example, if we add another team here, so let's say we add Liverpool for example, and then we click on Create Fixtures, you can see now that it's generated fixtures for 6 teams rather than 5. Now if we want the teams to meet more than one time, which is typical in many different types of leagues, we can just set that up here. So I change this number to 2 and then I do Create Fixtures again, and you'll see that it's recreated the league. And now we have double the number of fixtures. I'm just going to do it with 4 teams so that we can see it all on one screen. You can see that we've got 2 sets of fixtures, and in the first fixture Arsenal are at home to Chelsea, and in the second one you can see that Chelsea are at home. So we basically reverse them for every second one, because that's typically what you do in a league. Now once we've got the league created, we can generate a league table. So if we click Generate League Table, it creates a league table here which is blank, but we don't have any fixtures so far. So let's add some scores in here. We'll just add some random different scores for all the teams. And when we generate our league table, what we'll have is our league table sorted by points. So we click on Generate League Table, and you can see all the points have been calculated. So it sorts by points, then by goal difference, and then by goals scored. So that's the application that we're going to build, and let's go ahead and get started by adding in the button events. So let's create our first module, and our first module is click events. And what we're going to put in our click events is we're going to put in all the subs that run when we click on our buttons. So you can see the buttons we have here. Now these are actually shapes that I've used because I wanted to get just a different color. Now we're going to create the click event. So the click event is essentially a sub that runs when we click on a button, shape, or something else. Now we put underscore click at the end to make it very obvious what this sub is for. And we place it in our mod click events as well so that we've them all grouped together. Now the message box will allow us to see that it's actually worked. So we go to the button, and what we do is we right click on the button and we select Assign Macro. And then we double click on the sub from the list. And then when we click Create Fixtures, you can see it brought up the message box. So now we'll go back and we'll add in all our other click events for this application. And you can see Clear Fixtures, Generate Table, and Clear Table. So now we're going to insert a module, and this module is going to be for creating the fixture. So we call it Report Fixtures, as it's going to be creating a report. And this will manage the different parts of building the fixtures. So we'll call this public sub Create Fixtures. And what we're going to put in here at the start is a message box, so we just want to see that it works. Now we go back to our click events and we call it from there. We never want to have code in our click events, and that's why we're doing it this way. Click events simply call another sub. So now we'll go to the spreadsheet and we'll click on Click Fixtures just to make sure that it all worked correctly. And now that we know that it does, we can move on to the next part where we actually write the code for our report. So now we're going to start on creating the fixtures. And let's break it down into 3 tasks. We're going to generate the fixtures, then we're going to write out the fixtures, and then finally we're going to format the fixture. Now we're going to create a class for each one of these tasks, and this means we can put all the code for each of the tasks in one place, and it just makes the design and maintenance of our code much easier. So we'll call this class CLS Fixture Generator, and we'll have a public member, and this will be Create Fixtures. And what we'll do is we'll pass in an array into this, and then this will get filled. It'll become a 2-dimensional array of the fixtures which we'll get out. Now the reason that we pass it in is because if we pass it out using a return function, it creates a copy. So VBA always creates a copy of an array, and that can be very inefficient if it's copying the array and all its data each time. So how we call our class is very simple. We do dim fixture generator, and this is just can be any variable name, and we say new for the class. So now we've got a new instance of this class, and then we just use this variable and we just call create fixtures. And again, we're going to pass it. So we're going to pass it the array, and we'll just declare our array here, dFixtures out. Now, when we just have empty brackets, it means that later on we're going to set the size of our array. And when we press create fixtures, it writes out create fixtures to the debug window. Now, I've pressed it a few times, so when I press Ctrl G and bring up the immediate window, you can see create fixtures has been written out 3 times. And that means our code is working so far. Let's look at the method we use for generating fixtures. The first thing we do is we lay out the number of teams like this, the first half on the top and the second half in reverse on the bottom. And then what we do is we take the fixtures 1v6, 2v5, 3v4, and that's our first round done. And then what we do is we keep the 1 in place and we rotate the fixtures. Then we take another set of fixtures. We take 1v5, 6v4 and 2v3. And then we rotate it again and we take the fixtures again, and so on until we've all the rounds done. And the number of rounds is basically the number of teams minus 1. So for 6 teams, we've got 5 rounds. Now, in the case of the fact that we've got an odd number of teams, what we do is we add a dummy team and then we generate the fixtures as normal. And then at the end, we remove any fixtures involving the dummy team. So that's how we generate our fixtures. And if you want to try it on paper, you can see that it works quite well. So now we're going to go ahead and do this in the code. The first thing we're going to do is list out our tasks for creating the fixtures. So first of all, we want to set the array size. That's the array size of our fixtures out, which would basically be the number of fixtures in length. And then we want to loop through each round in the fixtures. Now, the first time what we do is for each round, we copy the round fixtures to the main fixtures out array. And then as we saw, what we'll do is we'll rotate the fixtures and we rotate the teams within the array, and then again we go back and copy that round and so on until we're through all the rounds. So this is what we have to do in our fixtures. Now, before we do all this, we have to basically get the teams from the user, and we've got to get the number of times they meet also from the users. So we're going to create a public sub, you can see here, and this is called set the user settings. And this will take the number of meetings, so the number of times the teams meet, and also it'll take an array, which is essentially a list of teams. And it's an array, a 2-dimensional array, because it's taken straight from the worksheet. Now, these are some of the variables that we're going to use. And you can see we've got meetings count, which is going to store the meetings. So this is quite straightforward to set. We just set meetings count to the parameter. And the reason we make it, as we call it, m underscore means a member variable. This means we can access it anywhere in our class. And this is why the class is advantageous, because it means that we're not passing these as parameters to all the different subs, which we'd have to do if we didn't have it in a class, if we had it just in a standard module. Now, team set equals true. We're going to use that later just to test that our team has been set. So if we don't do that, we'll get some kind of obscure error, whereas that will give us a proper error. What we want to do is we want to do a set of calculations. So I've created these calculations already, and we'll just import this class. It's included when you download the code. And if we look in it, you can see it has things like get total fixture count, get count round count, get fixture count per meeting, and so on. And these are just useful calculations that we'll use a bit later. So I'll just paste them all in here like this. And you can see that we're storing the different values. So we're storing team count original, round count, fixture count per meeting, and total fixture count. So we're going to paste in the variables for these as well. And as I said, because we're storing them as private members, it's easy then to reference them later. Now, we also need to declare a private variable for our calculation, because calculation is a class, so we need to just create an instance of it. So now we're going to switch to report fixtures. I'm going to take this code and just make it a little bit neater. So rather than having a variable, I'm going to use a with statement instead. So we can use it like this. We can say with new CLS fixture generator, and then we can just use the full stop for any of the methods or properties. You see, this makes the code a lot neater to read. So now from the fixture generation, we're going to call set user settings, and we're going to use our own functions here. We're going to use get meeting, which will give us back the meetings, and we're going to use get teams. So we use functions here because if in the future we change how we get these values, then it's very easy, just change it in the sub. And if we need get meetings anywhere else in our application, we can just reference these functions. So it makes our code a lot more flexible and makes it easy to change rather than having random values around the code. So these are both functions because they're returning something, and get meetings counts, what we're going to have in here is we're simply going to read from the cell on the worksheet. Now we don't want to put in just cell values, like we don't want to put in or the cell addresses like D2 or something like that. So what I use for this is we use consts. So the meetings one is D2. So rather than putting in D2, what we'll do is we create a const variable. And this means a variable that can't be altered within the application when our code is running. But what it really means is that we're giving it a meaningful name so that we don't just see the number D2 in our code. We actually know, okay, meetings range, this makes sense. And the second thing is, if we use this everywhere in our application and we want to make a change, then we just have to change it in one place and it'll be changed everywhere in our code. And then to get the teams, what we want to do is we just get the starting address, and we get that in a similar way. We're going to have a range and we're going to have a constant variable because we don't want to put in the actual values. So if we put in the team address, as I said, when you're reading the code again, it doesn't make sense what it is. But if you see team starting range, then it's quite obvious what we're using it for. And now we want to get the last. So what we want to do here is we want to get the last cell. So we do it like this. This is the typical way we always do it. We go to the last cell and we do end. And this jumps up and it will stop at the first cell from the bottom that has something. And we get the address of this and that'll end our range. And for the total range then, we get the value, and the value of a range is basically an array. Now we're going to just create this sub up here because we didn't create it already, or create this constant up here I should say, and we'll just set a team starting range, and we can see that the value we're looking for is in cell B3. That's where the teams start, so we're going to put that in as our constant. So we add a breakpoint here that will pause our code as we're running it. So we run our code because we want to step through it and make sure it's all working. So we do the get meeting count, and get meeting count, we want to check that it got the right value, and it did. It got us back 1. And now get teams, we want to see what this gets us back. So let's open this up into watch window. We do an add watch and we click OK. And I'll just drag this. This was on my second screen. I'll just put it here. And actually I'll just move it up a little bit so we can see exactly. You see we've got our array here. And we've got the different teams. So we've got Arsenal, Aston Villa. So it's read in all the teams as we expected it that it would. So what we've got is correct. Now in the user settings, you can see that we're setting everything. And now you can see the calculations make sense. Get the number of teams, get the round count. So it went here. We do the create fixtures. That obviously doesn't have any code in it so far, and it went through. But the fact that it stepped through all the code, we didn't get any errors, and everything seems to be working fine. The values checked out. That means what we have so far is pretty good, so we can go on and get started on the next step. What we're going to do now is we're going to create the array that we're going to use to rotate and to get our fixtures. So we're going to call this one get starting teams array, and we pass this the existing teams that we've got in from the user, and then we're going to convert this to a one-dimensional array. And we create this sub to do it. So we declare our team count. And the reason for this is that if it's a dummy team, we're going to change it. So we set the team count to equal the original count. So that could be, say, 5, for example, or it could be 6. And then we check the team count. So if the team count is an odd number, so for example, say it was 5, what we want to do is we want to add one more to the team. So we're basically just going to add a dummy team, do the fixtures with dummy teams, and then remove all those fixtures. So we set the array size to whatever the team count is. So that would have been, in the case of 5 teams, it would be converted to 6 teams. And now that we have it, what we do is we read through the original teams array we got from the user, and we simply copy over all the teams. And this will be our starting array. So we'll take the first set of fixtures from this, then we'll rotate it, get the next fixtures, and so on. Now we're going to put in a breakpoint so we can step through the code one line at a time and see exactly how this works. So you can see the breakpoint pause the code, and we use F8 to step through it line by line. Now team count is 6, we've added 1, our original teams was 5, we've added 1 to make it even, and now we're going to step through and copy to the new array. So let's open the watch window. We can do Alt View H or View Watches, and we'll just drag them into the watch window. You can see the new array, it's got 6 positions that are currently empty, and you can see the array that the user has. So this is the list of teams on the spreadsheet, and you can see that this has 5 teams. So we step through the loop, and you can see that it's copying them all over. So it'll copy the first 5 teams, and then position 6 will be blank because this is the dummy team. And later we'll delete all the fixtures that are empty. So position that involve position 6. Now that we have the starting team, let's go ahead and create the fixtures. The first thing we do is create the array that we're going to use. So this will be the array that we're returning the fixtures in. Now the number of rows is the number of fixtures, and we calculated this already. So we have the variable total fixtures count, and we can just use it here. Now we set the number of columns ourselves because we can decide what columns we're going to use. Obviously we're going to have team 1, team 2, but we're going to have a few extra columns as well. So rather than just having random numbers in the code for our columns, what I use is enums, and these are simply constants. And it means that if we write them in the code, it makes the code more readable. And if in the future we change the position of columns, we just change it here, and that means it will change everywhere else in the code. Now we're going to do the for loop, and the for loop will go through each round of fixtures. And a round is essentially one group of fixtures. So for example, with 6 teams, it could be 1 plays 2, 3 plays 4, and 5 plays 6. And we call that one round. So we set up the teams array already. And then the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to copy the round to the main fixtures out. And after we've done this, then we'll rotate the teams array again, come back, and we'll copy the next version of the teams array to the main fixtures, and so on until we've gone through all the rounds. So now we create the empty subs for each of these. And what we'll do then next is we'll start by filling out rotate teams and filling out that with the code. So rotate teams is how, when we're finished with our array, we rotate the teams to get the next set of fixtures. This will be position 3 because we keep the first position fixed, and we'll see how we use the second position in a moment. And the second one will be the last item currently in the array. So we're going to store the last item in the array, and we're going to set this to position 2 when we're finished moving all the items. So what we do is we read through the array in reverse, and we're basically moving everything up. So U-bound teams is the last item in the array, and we start here, and then we rotate we go down to position 3. We do step -1 because we're going backwards. So what we're doing essentially is every item from position 3, we're moving up 1. And then the item in the last position, we're pushing it off the array and we're putting it in position 2. So you can see the first time for 6 teams, M teams will say what's in position 6, replace this with what's in position 5, and so on until it goes down to 3. And then at the end, we copy the very last item in the array to position 2. And then we've got our set of fixtures, and we'll just copy these fixtures to the output fixture array. So let's put a breakpoint here. We just want to make sure that our code is working fine, and we'll run the code to the breakpoint. So it stopped at the previous breakpoint, but we'll just press F5 again. And now it's stopped at the breakpoint, and we can step over the code here. So we've brought up the watch window so we can see exactly what's happening. Now let's open the teams and let's add I and I-1. So we can see what the values and positions exactly are. And now what you'll see is that when we step on, in position 6, we've got Man United, which was copied from position 5. And then Chelsea was copied from position 4 to 5, Brentford from 3, and Aston Villa from 2. And then we put in what was the last team, which was the dummy team, and that goes in position 2. And now we have our second set of fixtures. Now we're going to start work on the copy round to main fixtures, which copies the fixtures after we've rotated. The first thing we need is a function to check for the dummy team, and if it's not a dummy team, we're just going to ignore the actual fixture. And it's a dummy team basically if it has no text in it, so if the text is empty. Now we need to put a const there, so we don't like to just have empty string in our code because then we wouldn't know exactly what it signified. So now we're going to start with 2 very useful variables. So the starting row is essentially the starting row in our current round. So we give it the round number and it tells us what our starting row is in the output array so that we can write out to the correct position in the array. Now we get this by using our calculation, and the calculation is get the round start position. So we know what position 1 is in the fixtures out array. Now the last team position is the last position in the array, and we use the ubound function to get it. And the way it works is that we take the team in position 1 and the team in the last position as the first fixture, the team in position 2 and the team in the second last position as the second fixture, and so on until we've gone through the entire array. So now these variables are much more straightforward. This is just team 1, team 2, and we're going to read through the array. So we start at the lower bound, and this is generally just going to be 1, so the very first position in the array, and we go to halfway in the array, because once we've reached halfway, we've got all the teams from both the end of the array and the start of the array. So we get team 1 first of all, and team 1 is in position I, so that's the first one. And we're going to get, as I said, team 2. Team 2 is going to be, in the first case, it's going to be the very last position in our array. So this is last team position, the last position in the array, and this is minus I, so whatever I currently is, minus 1. So what this will basically calculate is the first time it'll be the last position, the second time it'll be the second last position, and so on. So pretty straightforward calculation there. So what we want to do next is check that team 1 and team 2, that they're not the dummy team. If they're the dummy team, we won't do anything. We'll just ignore those particular fixtures. If they are something, so if it checked for dummy team is false, then what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll write them to the fixtures out array. So now we're getting on to the part where we write out the actual data to the array. Now one thing we want to do here is we want to deal with the fact that there are multiple meetings. So meetings are the number of times the teams meet. And the way it works is if they meet twice and we have 10 fixtures, then they'll have 20 fixtures. And so what we would do is we put the first fixture in position 1 and the second meeting of the teams will go in position 7. And we'd reverse the teams as well. So that's why the calculations here are that bit slightly more complicated. So what we're doing is basically our starting row, the current row is the starting row. In our example here, when starting row is 1 and meetings count is 1, we get back position 1. When meetings count is 2, we get back position 7, which you can see is the first of the second set of meetings. But if we had only one fixture, then we just use starting row. We wouldn't need everything else. So now we write out the current row. So that's one of the output columns that we have, the current row, and we're writing out the round as well. And how we calculate the round is by using this calculation here. And now we're going to write out team 1. Now if we just had one meeting, we'd simply write out team 1. But the way we're doing it is for the first meeting, we'll write it out as normal. And then for every even numbered meeting, so for the second meeting, the fourth meeting, what we'll do is we'll switch the teams around. So in other words, team 1 is team 1 in an odd meeting and it's team 2 in an even meeting. And then when we write out team 2, we're basically just doing the same thing but in reverse. So it's team 2 that is now equal to either team 2 or team 1. So this gives us the home and away fixtures in a standard league. And the last thing we want to do is move to the next row. So we've written out to row 1 in the array. Now we want to write out to row 2. So we add 1 to the starting row and go through it all again. So now that we have our class completed, we want to make sure that the output that we've got is correct. So we want to make sure that we've generated the correct fixtures. So the easiest way to do it is to create a simple sub and get this to print the results to the immediate window. So we don't need to worry about formatting or position or anything. It'll just print them out to a new line each time we use debug print. So this is our sub, it's very simple, and we're just going to use a for loop here. And this will go from L bound in the array. So L bound is the lowest dimension, or is the lowest position in the array. And 1 means dimension 1, which is rows, and U bound is the last in the current dimension. So dimension 1 again means rows. So if we had columns, we want to go through the columns, we'd use L bound 2 and U bound 2. So we do debug print and we say I is the current row and 3 then is team 1 and 5 is team 2. And this is our sub written. So very simple indeed, nothing too complicated about that. So we'll just declare I here as well, just to make sure that our code is correct. And now what we'll do is we'll go to the spreadsheet and we'll click on create fixtures. And then if you go back and bring up the immediate window, Ctrl G if it's not visible, you can see that it has the fixtures as we expected. So we can go through and check that they're correct. And we can run it with many different teams just to make sure that the fixtures that are being generated is what is correct and what we are expecting. If you'd like to know more about using classes in VBA, then check out the playlist on the screen. And if you'd like to get notified of my upcoming videos, then click on the subscribe button and the bell icon beside it. I hope to see you on the next video.